Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. Let me wrap up the books that I read in June, finally. I think you won't be seeing this video until the month of July, basically. My computer is been acting up and I just can't do anything with it right now. So hopefully you'll be seeing this video. But let me get into the books that I read in July. Now I already did wrap up of the books that I read in July, but June. I already did a wrap up of the books that I finished in June that are actually from May. And those were the books All the Lovers in the Night by Mieko Kawakami, The Bridge on the River Kwai by Pierre, Boulle, Pot-Bouille by Zola, and then one volume of manga, volume 35 of B Blues. So these I've already reviewed in my previous video, so if you want to see any of them, you can go to there. Other than that, I finished 2 more books in the month of June, and one of them was the play Malade, imaginaire, which is the Imaginary Invalid in English. And this is the 3rd play that I read by Molière, and it's basically about a man who is convinced that he basically has every malady in the world, that he's always sick, there's something wrong with his stomach, there's something wrong with his heart, there's something wrong with his head, there's something wrong with his intestines, his liver, his kidneys. He feels all the ailments and all of the cold spells, but I mean it's all imaginary. I think he basically just wants to be like the center of attention, and this is his only way to do it. So he has all these relationships with doctors and pharmacists who are basically just stealing his money because they know he's fine, but they're like, well, if you want to pretend you're sick, then we'll treat your sickness. And one day he gets the grand idea that he's going to marry his daughter to a doctor. That way there will be a doctor in the family, which means there will be a son-in-law who can take care of him all the time whenever he wants. However, his daughter is in love with someone else, and she's very much against this marriage, just like her, sort of nanny, basically one of the top servant in the home is also against it, because the top servant watched this girl grow up, and she knows that the daughter is in love with someone else. So they're trying to persuade the father to stop this crazy idea of the marriage with the doctor, while his wife is scheming that he dies so that she can steal all the money, and she's trying to get rid of the daughter to make sure that she gets all the money and not the daughter, basically. So it's this crazy, silly little plot. This was apparently the last play that Molière ever wrote before he died. He himself was quite sick, so he was in constant contact with doctors and pharmacists. And so basically he wrote this play to sort of demask the world of medicine, to show its hypocrisy, to show its greed, to show the utter stupidity of some doctors who are certain that they are masters of the universe because they're so intelligent, because they're doctors, even though they can't actually do anything. So this book was all about sort of criticizing that. There was also, and it was very fun, there was also one moment where Molière talks about himself in the play. Basically, the characters visit plays themselves, and one of them goes, well, what do you think about Molière's latest play? And the character's like, well, I don't really care for Molière, he's kind of a has-been, whatever. So I really liked that breaking the fourth wall action within the play. However, the play itself is basically a regurgitation of the previous play I read by him, which was Le Bourgeois Gentilhomme, which was also about a man who is very uneducated but wants to be a part of the upper class. So just like this protagonist sort of wants to be part of that medicine world, doctor world, etc. The previous play was also about this man who's just way above his head, kind of insane, kind of crazy, and is trying to be something that he can never be. So this is kind of regurgitation of that one. So while it has its humor, It's quaint, it's fun, it's silly. It just isn't that strong, and it's not a play that I would personally revisit over and over again. So a good way to complete a Molière reading journey, but not a top priority. So I read that. And then I read probably my favorite book of the month, and that was King Solomon's Mines by H. Rider Haggard. I loved this book. I was perfectly swept away by this. It is, think like the adventures of Indiana Jones, but older and sillier, and it really feeds or like kind of makes fun of the stereotypes, the stereotype of adventure stories, all of that mixed in with a little bit of Jules Verne, but not Jules Verne the science side of Jules Verne, but the adventure side of the adventure side of Jules Verne. So you mix that all in and you get this book, and I absolutely loved this. It's about so our main adventurer, Indiana Jones of the book, is a man called Alan Quaterman, I believe is how you would, or well, that's how I pronounce it, Alan Quaterman. And he's about in his 40s, so he's an older man. He's lived the majority of his life in Africa as an elephant hunter, so he's already had a lot of adventures, a lot of experience. And he runs into these two people, Sir Henry Curtis and Captain John Good, who are aware of his namesake and of his fame in terms of all of this adventure, like elephant hunting, etc. And they decide to ask him if he can help them search for Sir Henry Curtis's younger brother, who has gone off to find King Solomon's mines. Basically, this sort of almost fable legend that there's this one particular area in the mountains of Africa where these huge diamonds were found, but because it's so remote and so dangerous, no one has been able to either find them, or if they did find them, they just never came back alive. And it just happens that our man Alan Quatermain had via a previous adventure, he had been able to take into hand a map to these very mines, but he knows the journey is dangerous, he knows the history, he knows the legend. He's met the men who survived the adventure but immediately died from exhaustion, hunger, starvation, dehydration, etc. And so he never intended on taking this trip, but he ends up going to find these daring diamond mines, and with that comes great adventure, all wrapped up in these wonderful descriptions of what's going on, of the adventure itself, the journey itself, but just the heat of the moment, the tension of the moment, the emotions of the moment. You have great descriptions of the characters and all their physical being. That is absolutely fantastic. There's great humor mixed in, because this book does, it does take a bit of a humorous look at the adventure story and the absurdities of it, and it's just so well done. It's really well done. Now, I will say that obviously this book was written a while ago. It was written in 1885, and the book takes place in Africa. And the tribe, the Zulu tribe in Africa, is heavily featured in this book. And our main characters are white men. So I think you know where I'm going with this. That there are descriptions of particular members of the Zulu tribe that would not befit modern standards. They shouldn't have fit the standards back then, but they definitely do not meet modern standards. Now, Penguin, this edition of Penguin, has an excellent introduction that talks about this particular feature of the book. So it talks about that feature, and it also talks about Okay, so let me read this one sentence. As for race issues, generally, King Solomon's Mines exemplifies all the standard cultural bias against Africans one finds in the period, in sporting books and travelogues, as well as in the first novels that had yet appeared about colonial Africa. Yes, there is some unspeakable stuff to modern eyes and ears. Okay? So, yet, writer after writer and reader after reader will stand up and defend this book, including myself. Why is that? I want to try to answer that question in the preface, wondering as I do why my answer should feel like a personal apologia. So I think that this preface is excellent at tackling that idea of these particular themes towards the Black Native population via the modern lens. But I think the reason we are, as the writer of the preface states, why we all feel like we have to stand up and defend the book is that the character is a stereotype. The character is meant to be what he is. And that is very well portrayed. And when you portray something as it actually is, you're going to get the darker sides of it. But that's the whole point. So I don't know, it's up to you to decide, but I thought this book was absolutely fantastic. It's wonderful. I could read this over and over again. In fact, I had the great delight to discover that Alan Quatermain is not a one and done character. Apparently, aged writer Haggard wrote many a book about using this character as his main character, and he goes on other sort of adventures, and it's just a character I would love to revisit over and over again. So I'm on a journey to find more books with this character and by H. Rider Haggard, because this was absolutely fantastic. Absolutely love this. So that it's probably one of my best books this year, to be honest. So loved it. Anyway, that's what I read in the month of June. I'm so sorry that my schedule is, I'm just way behind. Again, computer issues just have been making things very annoying. So anyway, oh, I should mention what I'm reading so that you know what's coming up, or hopefully coming up. Since I finished the King Solomon's Brides, my next classic is The Rainbow by D.H. Lawrence. I'm about that far into it. I loved Lady Chatterley's Lover. I was actually taken by surprise by how much I loved that book, so I decided to finally revisit D.H. Lawrence, and I have to say I'm not liking this at all. So we'll get into that, but it's slow going. I am gonna finish it. I'm not gonna DNF it, although I should have. But I do want to go all the way to the end with this just to see what happens or doesn't happen. But not really enjoying that. Another book I've been reading is Big Sister, Little Sister, Red Sister: Three Women at the Heart of 20th Century China, which features on the three sisters of the Sun family who married very prominent figures of the time period, one being married to Sun Yat-sen, one being married to Chiang Kai-shek, and the one being married to the prime minister, where two of the women follow the liberal side of China, and then one of them ends up being a communist who becomes the head chairman of Mao himself. So a very incredibly important family in the time period, written by Jing Cheng, who I've read 2 of her major biographies so far, and she's an excellent writer. This one I have thoughts on. As you can see, I'm pretty far into it. I do have thoughts on this one, but I'll get into that when I finish this book. And then the other book that I'm reading is Le Roman de la Cité Interdite by Asada Jiro, which is the novel of the Forbidden City by the Japanese author Asada Jiro. This is the first time I read a book by him. I think you can see why. But I am absolutely swept away with this. It's very easy to read, and it's basically what I wanted. But it is a historical fiction about the Forbidden City, what's going on in the Forbidden City around the time of the late 1800s. So basically it's happening during when one emperor is and power. And so the book starts in 1886. And I think it's going to go through a few emperors of that. But basically, it's about two young boys and their fate. One of them, he was predicted that he will receive all the treasures of one of the empresses, or the concubine, and then the other one, that he would have a great destiny within the imperial palace. And so it's about how these two young boys relate to each other and their role in the future of China, basically. So I've really enjoyed this one. I just started it recently, but I'm flying through it because I just been wanting to read this and nothing else. In fact, this book has kind of been put aside because I decided I wanted to read this. It's the same thing that's been happening where like I'm loving a book, but I just want to start something else. And this one has just been staring at me from the shelf. I remember when I bought this, my mom was there. And she's like, are you really going to read that? Like, she reads long books herself. So I don't know why she made the question. But, I mean, I did buy a lot of books. I had like 20 books I had already bought. She's like, you're adding another 1,000-page book to your list? I'm like, yes, I am. So there, I'm reading it only like a few months later. Like 6 months later, I picked this book up. So, ha ha ha. But yeah, this is what I'm reading. And I'm really excited. I'm going to the beach as soon as I turn off this camera. And I will be bringing this with me. So there you go. That is what I am currently reading. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!